You know the words, Our Father, who art in heaven. It's got to be one of the most recognized phrases on the planet, right? It's the start of a prayer that so many of us could recite from memory, even if we're not religious. It's woven into the very fabric of our culture.
But what if that prayer, the one that's been repeated billions and billions of times for 2,000 years, what if it isn't the whole story? What if the version we all think we know is actually incomplete? That it's missing its original and maybe its most powerful ending? Yeah, okay, let's really get into this.
So the source we're looking at today makes this really bold, kind of provocative claim. It argues that there was a final line, a dangerous one, that was deliberately, intentionally erased from the prayer. And why it was erased? Well, that changes absolutely everything.
Okay, so you might be wondering, where in the world does a claim like this come from? And look, this isn't just some modern theory somebody cooked up. The argument, according to our source, is based on clues hidden in plain sight, really, inside ancient manuscripts that hold a completely different version of this prayer.
To be specific, the main evidence here comes from these ancient Ethiopic manuscripts. We're talking about texts that have been preserved for centuries, and they contain a version of the prayer that just keeps going. It doesn't stop where we think it does. It adds 2 more lines, 2 really specific and, frankly, powerful petitions.
So what's the first missing piece of the puzzle? Well, right after deliver us from evil, these older versions add this: keep us from the hour of trial. Now, think about that. That's not just, please make my life easy. It's a very specific request to be shielded from a time of intense spiritual testing.
And then comes the second line, which is, wow, it's even more striking. That we may not enter into the hands of the accuser. That really changes the whole vibe, doesn't it? It points to a direct confrontation with some kind of malevolent force, whether you see that as a literal devil or maybe even that internal voice of self-sabotage. So the big question is, if these lines were there and they're this powerful, why on earth would anyone take them out? And that right there, that leads us straight to the motive. Because the source we're digging into today says this was no accident. It wasn't just some scribe making a mistake or a simple translation error. No, this was a deliberate choice, a conscious decision made for one very specific reason: control, institutional control.
The core argument here is that by chopping off these last 2 lines, the whole balance of spiritual power was shifted. It took power away from the individual person praying and handed it over to the formal institution, to the church. But how exactly would that work?
Okay, this chart really breaks it down perfectly. Think of it as 2 completely different ways of seeing the world. On one side, you've got prayer as this personal, internal tool, something you use for your own spiritual awakening, to experience the divine directly. But on the other side, prayer becomes, well, it's a plea, a petition you send up to some distant god, like a king on a throne, that you can only get to through an official middleman, the institution. The source argues that the original ending empowered you, the individual, and that was seen as a threat. So here's the absolute crucial point. Getting rid of those lines wasn't just about making the prayer shorter or simpler. No, according to this source, it was about fundamentally changing what the prayer was for. It was about turning it from a personal technology for awakening into a simple plea for help from the outside.
And this is really the core of the whole revelation. In the original Aramaic, the language it was first spoken in, that ending wasn't just a way to sign off, like saying amen. It was an instruction. It was a call to action. It was literally telling the person praying what to do next.
Now, when our source uses that word, technology, don't think of smartphones and computers. Think of it in its original sense, a practical tool, a technique, a method designed to create a specific result. And in this case, that result was inner transformation. The prayer wasn't just something to be said, it was something to be used.
And this brings us to the ultimate point. The goal of that original prayer, the one with the missing ending, it wasn't about talking to God as some faraway being. It was about breathing with God. It was designed to pull your focus inward, to connect you with divinity through the most fundamental, intimate thing we have, our own breath. Or as the source calls it, the breath of the Father.
So let's just quickly recap what this all means. This interpretation suggests the original prayer was designed to do a few key things. To turn your focus inward, not outward. To connect you to that divine breath, and to act as a personal, practical tool for your own spiritual awakening. It completely transforms prayer, from a passive request to an active personal practice.
And so that leaves us with a pretty profound question to think about. Based on what we've looked at today, most of us have been taught that prayer is a plea that we send outward, up to the heavens. But what if its true original purpose was to be a tool to help us discover a reality that can only be breathed inward?